Hello everybody and welcome back to the series that I like to call Minecraft Basics. I'm going to teach you the basics of Minecraft. And today's episode is all about building your first Minecraft house. Let's go! Alright, so step one for transforming your little wooden shack into an actually nice looking house is by adding some detailing. So, one of the most popular ways to do this is by adding logs in each of the corners. So like this. And you can already see that has already given it so much more detail and it already looks so much better. But that's not even the half of it. So after you've gotten your details like this, sometimes these details can be a little bit bland and not stand out that much. So now we're going to start on the roof. So for simple, cheap starting design, you can start off by adding just a simple slab roof. It already adds a lot of depth and makes it look a lot better. But let's say you're looking for something a little bit more detailed than just that simple flat top. Well, the thing that you might be looking for is a slanted roof. So there's a lot of ways to do a slanted roof. You can do them with either stairs or slabs, or you can just do them with blocks. But for now, we're going to stick to the stairs and slabs. So I'm just going to be doing it with some simple stairs. So you can start by making a slant that goes up like this and ends with both of the areas being combined into one. Now, they may not fit perfectly, but if they don't, you can just place a block in the center. But please, I'm telling you, fill in these holes right here. Trust me, it will help make your build look so much better. But currently, it's not looking that realistic. So what we might want to do is, one of the things you can do is extending the stairs one out on either side. So you can do them like this. I forgot to fill in this piece, but can already see that it has turned that wooden shack with 4 logs into something much, much better. But this still looks a little bit weird considering there's not much of a slant to it. So what you can do is you can add some stairs beneath these stairs that make it look like this, right? And that will just help add so much more depth to it and it will help it look so much better. So if we just do this on either side, you can already see it makes it look so much thicker and altogether just really good. Now you may be wondering, how can I add more detail to my build? And that is by windows. There's a lot of different designs for windows. So to start off with, we have just the basic window. Please just try to avoid putting this in your builds. It's just really basic and it really only works when it's accompanied by a lot of other detail. But if you want to add a little bit more detail and make it less basic, you can just add a trapdoor right here like this. And it doesn't help a lot, but it just, in some cases, it's just nice to have there. Because it just brings out your build and gives it some 3D depth. And then if you want to go even further, you can put a plant in a plant pot on top of that trapdoor. Just flip the trapdoor open and you put the plant pot on top of that. And that just helps add so much more. But moving on from these 1x1 windows, we can move on to the 2x1s. This is where you can actually start to add a lot more detail. So you can start off with something simple, like just adding 2 trapdoors, and that'll work just fine. Or you can go for an even fancier design and surround the window with trapdoors. And I don't know, maybe you can put a pot of plant there. Now, this one is pretty expensive, but it is definitely worth it if you want to add just a little bit of fancy. You can just add some trapdoors right here along with some fences. It it really helps bring out the build if you want a lot of detail in it. So now onto the 2x2 windows. This is just something that I came up with. If you were to continue this design, it would form like a long barrier of windows. And honestly, I think this is pretty cool because you can put potted plants in here. You can put anything you want really under this window, and it's pretty simple and pretty cheap. You only need a couple of trapdoors and your window, and you're pretty good to go. So this next design is a little bit more expensive than the previous one, sheltered house. But if you're going for a sheltered window, this is definitely one of the best ones to go with, because it looks like it can support the top, while the top also isn't too thick or thin, along with like a supporting base. And you can add a plant pot if you really want to just help add that color to it. Just a quick note, you probably aren't going to need any of the following window designs when you're building your first Minecraft house, but I just included these because late game, they're pretty nice to come back to, just if you want an idea. So starting off, we have this circular design. If you were to give this a little bit more room, it could definitely look a lot better, but with the room I had given myself, I just tried to make it work the best I could, and I'd say I did a pretty good job. But if you really wanted to add some more detail, maybe you could add like a trap. Maybe you could add like a trapdoor there and a trapdoor over here, just to make it look just a little bit thicker. Yeah, I think that's helped a little bit. But this is a really cool window design that really helps you add some different shapes to your build, so it's not all blocky. And then for our next 3x3 window design, I went kind of basic, but it still definitely provides this sort of simple look. Not a lot of detail, but just a nice simple window. For the next one, I did a 4x4 window, and I decided to add quite a lot of detail to it. So you can see, this is something you can do if you really want to add some more texture to your build. You can add 2 different types of glass panes. So you can see I've done white and gray because it mixes together to form this kind of weathered window kind of look. And you can see I've added some gates to it to differentiate it a bit, just so that it's not all fences. And I've added a couple buttons just because it's fun to play with, and it just makes it look a lot better. But one last thing, you can see that up here I've kind of added an arch to the design. And from a distance away, that does kind of help form the kind of circular effect, if you will. But does kind of help form the circular effect. And that's the last window that I'll be showing off. I hope this helped. What's that you're telling me? You want to learn how to build a bigger house that can hold a lot more things? Alright then. Well, let's get into it. Okay, so one of the first things that you're going to want to do is plan out the shape of your house before you actually build it. So let's say I want to go for a house with a lot more kind of shape to it. I will be using an oak log to indicate each corner of the building. So I might want to make it, I don't know, maybe 5 blocks wide. And then I'm just going to go to a point that I think would be good. So maybe over here. And then I'm going to go to that place on the other side and place my log. So the next thing that I'm going to want to do is indicate a turn. So let's say I want to turn this way just to add a little bit more. I can again go to a point that I think would be good, maybe over here, and separate it by however much I wanted. I think I'm going to have it the same over here, so 4 blocks, and place my oak log back over here. So you can see that now I have a rough shape for how my building's going to look. So now I can start filling that in with my planks. Okay, so you can see this is a more elaborated version of what my house is going to look like once it's done. So for this, I'm going to make the logs 4 blocks tall. But before I do that, I like to make a PSA. So please, for the love of everything, do not make your roofs 2 blocks tall. It's so uncomfortable because you can't jump underneath it. And it just starts feeling really cramped. Like you can see with a 2 block wide doorway, it just starts to feel very cramped, which isn't what we're going for with this house. So just try and stay away from that. please try and stay away from that. Alright, back to the building. I'm gonna start filling in this house now. Now that I've got the general shape of my house laid down, I can start adding some simple details. So, to start off with, this is just generally a good tip. I'm going to bring the oak logs out one from the corner and replace these with oak planks. So, in some builds, this isn't going to look good. But for a lot of wooden houses, this is going to look pretty fabulous. And if you have a sharp corner like this, I'd recommend just putting a pillar right there. But I'm going to start by bringing out pretty much every oak log out by a block, except for these ones, which I'm just going to replace with oak planks. But every oak log is mainly going to be brought out a block. So you can see that's just added so much more depth to it, and it started to make it look like an actual house, pretty much. Now, onto the roof. So, again, there's a lot of different designs you can do for the roof. Since I only demonstrated the stair slanted roof, I'm going to demonstrate the slab slanted roof now. So it's essentially the same as any other slanted roof, except for the fact that, well, it's made out of slabs. Sometimes this can be a little bit tricky to work with, but after a while, you should be able to get it lined up. And here is one of the things that I struggle with the most when doing these types of roofs, is pesky little blocks like this that stick out, because if you want a roof to look flawless, you're going to want this to be there, right? You're going to want to have wood going all the way up. And that just kind of ruins it, like, a lot. Because then you end up with wood up here, and you're going to end up with, like, pretty much lines of wood, or pretty much just dots of wood in some places, which is really annoying. Which is really annoying if you want a house to look professional. So, my best counter for that is by simply making the cobblestone slabs 2 blocks thick. At first, it can look a little bit chunky and a little bit off, but trust me, it's just going to be worth it if you want that kind of slanted roof look. And after this, the next thing that we're going to do is just extend it out 1 more block like we did the stairs. Just that it overlaps the oak logs and just makes this look real nice. Sometimes this little block right here can be really annoying because it doesn't look like the pillar is going all the way up. But sometimes you just have to deal with that if you want to do this kind of roof. You can extend this to go all the way back, which is what I'm going to do now. Alright, so now that I've finished with the roof, it's time to move on to the windows. Alright, so now that I've got my materials ready, I can start building. So I think I'm going to start by putting a window on this wall, because that's kind of a wall that you really see when you first come in. So So I think to do this, I'm going to make a 2x3 window. I didn't list the 3x2 over there, but using some of the details and knowledge from over there, I'm sure you can put together a pretty good looking window. Now we can start adding things in here. Do I want to have slabs? I don't think I want to have slabs. Do I want to have trapdoors? Yeah, trapdoors look really nice here. Maybe on the top too. No, not on the top. But once you've kind of come up with what you think would look good, you can start to add more windows to the other sides. So now we can kind of try and design these. So I think for the windows on the side of this house, I'm just going to stick with something simple. So maybe 2x2 windows with just simple trapdoors underneath. And maybe the occasional potted plant. So windows on the front of your house actually get kind of complicated, because you can see you can't put a window here really, because that leads to that side, and we can't put it on the other side. And I would try and stay away from putting things in the middle, because when you put your doors there, it's just going to end up looking really weird. Or if you really wanted windows on the front of your house, you could add like glass blocks here. But in my opinion, it still just looks a little bit weird. So for now, I think I'm just going to keep the front of this house empty and blank, and we'll add some more detail later. So now we get on to the long sides like this. It's always weird to make windows for the long sides, because they always end up being really huge if you try and go too overboard. So what I'd suggest is something simple, like maybe a 4x2, a 4x2, and then a 2x2 in the center. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do right now. So if I just fill these in, I can kind of start brainstorming now. So maybe if I added like these little things underneath, that might add some depth. And honestly, I think it does. So here's what I think is going to be the finished product of our windows. You can't put anything on top of these trapdoors without it floating up, but it should still be able to look pretty nice. And then to the back side. For a lot of the back sides of houses, I would recommend not putting any windows. I mean, maybe like one over here to match with that other side. But other than a simple window like this, I wouldn't put anything over here or over here. So you might be thinking that your house is done now, but there's still a couple more details that we can add. Just a pretty simple one is that in corners you can add something that looks structural. So you can add fences like this, which kind of add to it. You could add gates, although I'm not sure how you'd make gates work unless you put them like that. But a pretty simple one is just to put fences in each of the corners. Up here, I don't know about on the front though, because in the front it doesn't really meet up with that. Although if you break this bottom slab, it does work pretty well, just like that. And maybe you can add some more fences. Maybe you can add some more fences over here. Although I might not like how that looks when it links up with that. I'll have to look over this some. But so far, I think it's looking pretty good. And then in the back, we can just do the same thing we did in the front. Break that slab, add some structural supports right here. Just kind of like that. Some of the last finishing details you can add are gradients. So sometimes if you want your builds to look old or kind of in the wild, you can start adding a gradient like this using either a darker color and a lighter color, or a lighter color and a darker color. These are sort of the same, but they really do help create this kind of effect with it. You don't necessarily have to add gradients to your build, but sometimes they just add that kind of finishing touch that you need to make your house just look kind of finished and final. So after you've decided whether or not you want gradients, there's one last finishing detail that we can do. Okay, so I think after a little bit of kind of playing around with things, I've come to a front design that I kind of like. So you can see I've used the textures of birch, oak, and spruce buttons to kind of add just some textile features to it. Just kind of add a little bit more depth to it, and just to help bring out the build some. And then I've kept the fences, but I've added stairs underneath them. I'm not too sure about the stairs, but I do think that they add a little bit of a nice touch, so I'm going to keep them there. But remember that the number one most important thing to remember while building is that you got to test things out. A lot of things aren't going to work at first. You won't first, and that's okay. Just got to try out some new things. Just got to take some risks. You might want to add some buttons, and if you just want that texture kind of all around the house, you can just add some buttons all over the house, and trust me, it will help add a lot of texture to it, especially in the areas in the back like this where there's not much here. They do really help add some texture there. And I'm just going to continue placing these buttons in places, but you don't want to overdo it, okay? If you add too many buttons, it can end up looking crowded or just kind of unnatural. So try and steer as far away as you can from having more than, I don't know, 5 buttons on any side. I think that's just some typically good advice. Okay, so you want to start the interior of your house. That's a great idea, considering currently the interior of our house looking kind of like a cage in a zoo. But you might be like, what floor should I choose? There's a lot of different floor designs, and it can be hard to pick at first. So I'm going to lay out some for you to see. Okay, so I've assembled some of the floor types, and let's take a look at them. So starting off with number 1, we have the classic. This is just what most people do when they build the first house, just a floor of just regular planks. It's pretty bland, but in a lot of builds, it will work fine. Next, we have a little bit more of an expensive option, but it does provide this really nice effect. So how you get this effect is you take a stripped log or regular log, doesn't really matter, and you'll place it kind of in a checkered pattern with 3 facing this way, and then on the sides of those you'll place ones going that way, and it will create this really cool effect. If you just mirror it in a checkered pattern, it'll create this really cool looking effect that makes it look like they're kind of woven together. Next we have a tile pattern. This one's pretty affordable early game, as it only takes polished andesite, which you can craft using this recipe, and stone, which you get by smelting cobblestone in a furnace. And you just place them in a checkered pattern like you did with that one, and it really helps create this kind of effect, and it makes it look like the andesite is raised up higher than the stone. And now we have an actual tile pattern. This is probably good for bathroom builds. Here's a design that's not so easily obtainable early on in the game, and here's a design that's easier to obtain early on in the game. And then next we have just the carpet. This is really cool if you want to add a little bit of color to your build. Just cover it up with carpet, and I guarantee you it will look amazing. Okay, so after you've decided which floor you're going to go with, for me I'm going to go with this one, but instead of using stripped oak logs, I'm going to use stripped spruce logs, which will look a little something like this instead of what we had before. And once you've selected which floor you're going to use, you should be ready to go with your build. So typically the first thing that you're going to want to do now that they're taken care of, the first thing that you're going to do is literally just break your floor. And then after you've mined out your entire floor, you can pretty much just start building the floor that you chose. Since I've chosen this floor pattern, I'm going to get the materials I need, stripped spruce logs, and I'm going to start building it in my house. So I'm just going to build it until it's done. And now that you're done with your floor, we can start focusing on the interior, really. Typically in most houses that are 4 or 5 blocks wide, you're going to want a double bed, or even a triple bed. And it just helps fill up so much space and add so much more room. Okay, so after we've placed the beds, we can start adding more details, like little nightstands, which you can do by placing trapdoors on top of gates to kind of form this little thing that looks like it comes out from the wall. And just trust me, it'll help add this look to your bedroom. This is something that you can do if you want to be like really fancy, and that is adding banners to make your bed look like it's covered by like sheets. And if you want to, you can place like trapdoors on top to just kind of help make it look more realistic. And then from a distance away, it looks like the bed is completely covered in these little curtains. And then once you go to bed, you can see the curtains and it just kind of feels secure, and it definitely helps it look better. But moving away from the beds, we can get into the other aspects of a base that can look nice. So what we can do on this wall over here is like a bookshelf to the wall by using trapdoors and kind of forming this little area that you'd actually typically see in real life. Like these shelves like these you'll actually see these. It's just a pretty nice touch to your build if you add like little bookshelves like this. And by placing bookshelves like this, you can see we've got this really cool bookshelf design. We're just going to keep it looking like this. It does look a little bit bland, but it's the best we can do without it showing through on the other side. Alright, so remember how I talked about the carpet floor earlier? Well, that's what I'm going to do in here. I'm going to add a little carpet floor, and it just kind of helps add some pop to the build. Like, it helps add some nice color. It helps bring out the opposite colors of this kind of bed. I think it looks good, although in some scenarios you might want to try and avoid going with mismatching colors, because in some cases it's going to look bad. And then, oh my god, I forgot the doors. So there's quite a few different ways you can do doors, but for my house I'm probably just going to add in just some simple doors, kind of like this. They just kind of let you go in and go out. However, there is actually a really cool way to do doors. If you don't want zombies to be able to get in, place your doors like that. Because zombies will see this as an open door and won't try and break it down when you're in hard mode. That's just a cool hack that you can use for your doors. Back to the interior. So you may notice when you walk into your house, this entrance is a little bit bland. So we can kind of change that by adding maybe like a little couch over here. And then, I don't know, maybe this design over here as like a little eating area where two people can eat together. There's really only one more thing we need. Lights. Because as you can see, currently, our house has 0 block light, which means that at night, a whole ton of mobs are going to be able to spawn in here. So to add a light, you might want to start by covering up those holes in the roof that you see just by placing blocks like this. And once you're done, you can kind of change this up how you want, because a ceiling can change a lot about how a build looks. For example, if you have a curved roof like this, it kind of makes it look more grand. It makes it look more like an archway. So honestly, I think I'm going to stick with this kind of roof, just because even though it makes it look a little bit smaller, it just helps add a little bit of curvature to the room. Even in a game with all blocks, the room can still look curved. But in some places, kind of like this, you aren't really going to be able to place any slabs up there, which kind of sucks. Other than that, there's not really an issue with doing this type of roof. Okay, so now on to the actual lighting part of lighting. So there's a lot of different ways to do lighting, and one of the most stylish ways is with lanterns. So you can see if I add some lanterns to the roof, it definitely helps light the place up while also looking pretty good. But they do look a little bit weird when they're placed in twos, so I don't think this is our answer. Okay, now here's a really cool way to light up your house. So, for those of you that didn't know, light can shine through carpet. So, if you place a redstone lamp or glowstone underneath a carpet, it'll emit light. It's really weird, but it will. So like, if I just add another carpet over here, maybe this time with lighter colors than before, and place some lanterns in different places, it should emit a decent amount of light. So if I pull up my F3 screen and I'll highlight where you can see how much light it will get, where it says 13 block, that pretty much shows you the light level that will be there at night. So if I walk along, you'll see that the light level never gets to the level it needs to be to spawn mobs, which is light level 7. The light level actually did reach light level 7 in that corner over there, so I just added a nice little lamp over here. So you can see that now in no corners of the house does the light level actually dip down to light level 7, which is the light level that it needs to be to spawn mobs. So pretty much this entire house is now mob-proof. And with all of that being said, this should finish off the interior of your house. And I hope I could help you in this tutorial. Have a great day. See you next Sunday.